All right, hello everyone. We're going to go ahead and discuss our essential question this week. What are the requirements for life? So let's talk about where life came from. So just a note, we are in science class, so we can only focus on this type of thing. So just to be clear about that. So if you have any alternative viewpoints, that is entirely okay, and I support those. But in science class, we have to go by the science. So let's go ahead and discuss the timeline for life on Earth. So as far as scientists know, based on radiometric dating, 4.5 billion years ago, we have the formation of Earth. There is no life at this point because Earth is a hot mess, is what I put it. I mean, it's a boiling lava planet. There's no water, there's no air. It's just a hot mess. I thought that was a good summary. So, 4.4 billion years ago, a collision forms the moon, and likely water comes after this. Still, there's no life. So, if you didn't know that, supposedly our moon came from a collision, either from another planetary body, or even possibly the moon itself. I don't know, but I think the theory is that it was from something big that was outside of our solar system. So for whatever reason, when this happened, it allowed enough gases to be released and potentially water starts to form. Still, there's no life. Even though we have water, we don't have life. So nearly 500 million years later, 4 billion years ago, we start to see evidence for single-celled life. We call these prokaryotes. Prokaryotes come from amino acids and RNA, and I say or something, because there are a lot of competing theories as to why, or I mean how life formed. Why life formed is for religious purposes, but how life formed here is an or something. The ones that I found that seem to make the most sense are the ones where amino acids and RNA are involved. And later on in the year, we'll discuss evolution and we'll get into that. But now I just want to focus on these bare requirements here for life. And then another 500 million years later, 3.5 billion years ago, oxygen becomes easily available. Because early plant life starts to photosynthesize. And I say early plant life, and I realize now that that's a little bit of a mistake. These early prokaryotes weren't technically plants. They were ancestors to plants. That's because 2 billion years ago is when we start to get something called eukaryotes, which are considerably more complex than prokaryotes. If you've ever heard of the membrane-bound organelles, that's what eukaryotes have. And prokaryotes over here that showed up 2 billion years previous, they just have their DNA all floating in their cytoplasm, and eukaryotes have their DNA in the nucleus. So from here on, I say the rest is evolutionary history, because eukaryotes, we start to get plant cells, and then we get animal cells, and you get multicellular creatures, and then the rest I could just go on, and this could be all we talk about, but this is not our focus. I do want to point out here, so here we go from life forms, and then finally we get this complex life that we recognize today that took 2 billion years. So this concept of evolution, this, survival of the fittest, or the adaptations required to respond to the environment, took 2 billion years just to go from one type of single cell to another type of single-celled organism. 2 billion years. All right, so here I just have some photos that I wanted to share with you. So this here is an example of a prokaryotic bacterium. Um, these kind of things still exist today. They are hardy organisms. This is an artist rendition of the formation of the Earth. Over here is an artist rendition of the formation of the Moon. And over here, you probably have seen this in all of your science textbooks. You have eukaryotic cells, which are cells that have membrane-bound organelles, such as the mitochondria, and floating around in cytoplasm. And here we have our, this is our nucleus with the DNA, whereas in this one, the DNA is all floating throughout. So let's just ask this question real quick. What took so long? It took, again, 2 billion years. Well, the short answer to that is Earth was inhospitable. I mean, you have an entire planet of boiling magma, and it took at least 1 billion years for everything just to chill out, for the planet to solidify, and for it literally to become cool enough for things to happen. Now, we don't want it too cold because then nothing grows. Nothing can come of that. You want the right temperature, and then again, I said 2 billion years, so this was about 1 billion years in the beginning. And 2 billion years later, we have the eukaryotic organisms, and that's where we have oxygen forming. And oxygen comes out of it because sunlight, these organisms were able to adapt to convert sunlight into energy. And this process created oxygen as a byproduct. So if you're familiar enough with photosynthesis, you have plants or plant-like organisms, which is what those were, absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere, metabolizing it into oxygen to get their energy source, glucose. So 3 things were needed for life to thrive. Now I want to point out I use this word thrive, not survive. I say thrive because life flourished. It wasn't just barely holding on. It flourished. Life exploded. After eukaryotes came into existence, multicellular organisms, and the evolution of everything else just exploded. We have something called the Cambrian explosion because life just took off. And what really made that happen was kind of threefold here. You have sunlight or energy sources. I say or energy because energy can come from the Earth because you have radioactive materials giving off heat within the Earth. And so some things do thrive because of that, but the majority of things are getting their energy from the sunlight at the surface of the planet. So all cells have always needed energy. All the way from 4 billion years ago to today, they all need energy to survive. Specifically, adenosine triphosphate, or what we just always refer to as ATP. This is the fuel for cells. It's the fuel for cells of prokaryotes 4 billion years ago, and it's the fuel for our cells today. And it's made in a few different ways. Prokaryotes just had to work harder to get it before photosynthesis came along, and our cells, which are eukaryotic cells, use mitochondria. The other key ingredient for life to thrive was soil or nutrients. So I say soil or nutrients because nutrients can come from other things other than soil, but the first main types of life that we had was plant life. The first eukaryotic organisms, and they relied on eroded materials from rocks. And even the nutrients that you find at the bottom of the ocean are a type of soil at its core, but I allow that ambiguity. So life needs inorganic materials for building blocks. What do I mean by those building blocks? So in order to form proteins and other important parts, so this is literally the cell taking these pieces and putting together, they require base materials. Those base materials are elements. So carbon, for instance, we are carbon-based life. All life is carbon-based life that we know of. And elements like oxygen, silicon, nitrogen, all of these things are important, and they come from the soil. And then I include in here they're spewed from hot seafloor smokers. So there are theories that life came together in these areas, hot seafloor smokers. These are like volcanic activity spewing sulfur-rich gas and heat into the bottom of the ocean, and that those ingredients, these elements, helped build the first forms of life. And then finally, life, as far as we know, does not exist without water, and I call it the solvent. You'll see a lot of science videos called water the solvent of life. It's because water is what makes chemical reactions happen and makes them come alive. Without water, we don't have acidity. Without water, minerals don't dissolve. So it takes thousands and millions of years for soil to form from eroding rocks. Enough of it to erode to make those nutrients for life. It also allows chemical reactions to occur for a cell to function. So in your cell, you have, it's based in cytoplasm, like 90% of the cell. Well, I don't know, it's probably 70%. I always hear 70-30 is the word, right, for what we are made out of, or 70% water, 30% other stuff. But a cell is mostly water. It's cytoplasm, and it needs cytoplasm to be able to move about the cell and for other chemical reactions to occur. So let's delve into next question. How do we determine what is live? So you probably have encountered this question before, but let's just review real quick and look at a few more advanced concepts. Does it grow or change is our first one. If you're looking at an object, you don't know if it's alive. Over a period of time, do you notice growth or change? I say grow or change because not everything is going to grow, but maybe it moves around or something happens. All living cells undergo mitosis and or repair themselves in some form or another. This is the ability of a cell to continue living in response to its environment. So like if you get a cut and that cut heals, your skin cells had to undergo mitosis in order to heal. If you have a colony of bacteria, it's going to undergo mitosis to keep on living. Does it metabolize? There's that word again, metabolize. So here I have the Krebs cycle. This is a part of metabolism. You have ATP being formed, and you have CO2 being created from oxygen through this process. Living cells require a food source for nutrients. They turn those molecules into other things and produce waste. For example, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out CO2. So can you observe this thing that you're trying to determine if it's alive, it creating waste? So if you ever smell gross things in your trash, you put something in there and it's stinky the next day, there's something alive in there, and you can tell because there's a smell, and it's producing a gas, usually methane. Does this thing that you're observing respond to stimuli? If you are giving a plant light, is it changing the direction it's facing? Is it growing again here? So living cells can respond to their environment, reacting to a loud noise as an example, changes in pH or reacting to light. Those are all examples. So finally, to be alive, this thing has to be able to reproduce. Okay? So living cells can produce offspring, whether that's through meiosis or mitosis. Meiosis is for sexual reproduction, and mitosis is asexual, which is usually what you see in single-celled organisms. So I want you to know the difference between meiosis and mitosis, and the way that I always do it is that S there in the middle of meiosis reminds me of sexual reproduction. Starts with an S, starts with an S. And mitosis is not for sexual reproduction. And that's what works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. So all of these things are needed to determine if something is alive. Well, oftentimes people ask at this point, I'm not talking to anybody right now, I'm just talking to myself. So I'm going to ask, what about a virus? Is a virus alive? Well, maybe. Scientists are not sure. Scientists for a long time have said that no, viruses are not living things, but they reproduce. They respond to stimuli. They grow and change. I'm not sure if they metabolize, though. They do some of the things in life. They're like quasi-alive. So it's an interesting question. Is the ocean alive? It moves. It grows. When the wind blows it, it moves. It doesn't really reproduce, though, and it doesn't metabolize. Is a tree alive? Well, it grows. It metabolizes, produces oxygen. It grows because of the sunlight, and it does reproduce. It has seeds, so yes, trees are alive. So I'll leave it there, and we'll move on. Vocab from this that we will discuss, and there is another video where we go through the vocab, but there are a couple words in here that weren't in that video. So nutrients, those are inorganic materials that life requires to survive. Minerals, these are geometric elements that build on each other. You find these in soil and rocks. Elements, they have an atomic number on the periodic table. Soil, these are little bits of rock and minerals and decomposed organic material, so old plant matter, old animal matter and such. Water, H2O, it's a polar molecule. The reason water does everything that it does is because it's polar, and we'll have a whole section on that, and I'll explain that then in more detail. To metabolize, you take in nutrients and you excrete waste. Prokaryotes were the first life. Pro means first. Eukaryotes were the next type of cell. So these are the two main cells that we'll talk about in this class when we talk about cells. First life, more complex cells came 2 billion years later. The cell itself is the smallest unit of life. Meiosis is cell reproduction, cell splitting. Mitosis is cell splitting, but does not involve sexual reproduction like meiosis. Okay. So you had the terrarium project. So we're going to delve into our next question is, can you keep it alive? Will it survive? Okay. So terrarium is an enclosed clear container for growing plants, and you're making a DIY soda bottle terrarium. So here are some examples of what I did at home. Here's one on its side that's open. Here's one on its side that's closed. Here's one on its side that's open again. Here's one standing up that's partially closed up there. And here is basically a potted plant, a bunch of potted plants here. There's that fox skull I told you about. So all you really need to do this is the soda bottle, soil, plants, water, and the sun. So I look forward to seeing those. So what you're going to be doing with these is testing the effect of indoor air on Arctic plants, essentially. Are you going to notice any changes taking this thing from its natural environment and putting it inside your house? So every week we're going to observe, we're going to record, and we're going to analyze. And I need you to really understand what I mean by that. So observations is simply using your senses or data collection tools. So sometimes you can't see things, but maybe with a microscope you can see things, data collection tools. Now you can observe all day long, but if you don't write it down in your record, you aren't going to be able to collect proper data to make an analysis. So an analysis is answering this question. What do you think your observations are telling you? For example, you're probably going to see a little bit of yellowing in the leaves. What do you think those yellow leaves are coming from? Is it because the air is too dry? Is it too warm? Maybe there's not enough soil. Maybe it's not enough water. Flowers are blooming. Maybe that's because my plant is just getting the enough nutrients, water, and sun. So that's where that analysis is going to come from, is from your observations and what you've recorded. It's very important we do that every week. So survival is the ability of a species to continue existing despite difficult circumstances. We have had things go extinct. In our lifetimes, things have gone extinct. None of these Arctic plants are going to go extinct because you're putting them in your house, but on a small scale, what are you going to do to help it survive? More vocab. Terrarium. Terrarium is a closed container for growing plants. Arctic biome is, hold on. Well, we'll go to that here in a second. So it looks like there's an issue here with what's being shown. So, well, we'll go over this real quick. So the terrarium is enclosed container, Arctic biome. This is where we live. It's a harsh climate ecosystem where things are especially adapted. You have various species here. Species is a group of organisms that's able to reproduce, that are especially adapted. Adaptations are things that include the ability to survive specific climates. So like a sunflower isn't going to survive here in the Arctic. Survival is the ability of a species to continue to exist despite difficult circumstances. Observations are what you see or feel or whatever with your senses or tools, and analysis is what you determine in your experiment from those observations. Okay, I'm back. So anyway, I just wanted to go over different things that relate to survival here. So the Arctic biome includes species of many plants that are especially adapted to the harsh climate. These adaptations include the ability to withstand a soil low in pH. So the soil here oftentimes is hovers around a 6. 7 is water, 6 is slightly more acidic. You'll see plants with very dense, shallow root systems. That's because they can't grow much deeper due to permafrost and rocky soil. They have faster growing seasons, so when the sun is up, these plants grow, and I've noticed even with my own terrarium that these plants do grow even indoors. They do this to maximize the sunlight because they won't get sun for half the year. And they find ways to essentially hibernate during the winter underneath the grass, the snow, sorry. And will you be able to make it survive? Well, that depends. If you give your plants what they need, they'll survive. If they die, it's because they are in the wrong growing conditions. That could be because it's too hot. That could be because there's not enough water. That could be because there's not enough sun. All kinds of things could affect that. All right, that's it, everybody. You know where to go if you have any questions. If you forgot my email, it's andrew.hogan@nsbsd.org. You can find me on Google Hangouts or any number of things. You can call the school. You can check out my website, whatever you want. Have a great day.